Death Mage 283, Another Guider and Shaken Gods. The damage to Gorn and his defending force in this battle was great, second only to the damage they had taken during their first battle against Vandalyu. They had learned their lesson in the prior battle. When the fake Quattro exploded, they had immediately created defensive walls with magic and physical objects like rock and ice, and the god of mirror images Larpen had switched his focus from impeding Gufidgarn and Legion to protecting Gorn and his allies. The explosion itself had also not been as powerful as the first one. Thus, they had fortunately not suffered much direct damage. However, the Seabird Beast King Valfez had been slain, and the Iron Colossus Nabanga, who had fallen and landed on the continent, had been confirmed to be dead. And although the demigod's wounds were relatively light, they were not so light that they would be able to fight again at full strength right away. As for the leading members of the defending force, Gorn, the commander on the battlefield, had suffered terrible burns on his right arm, and 4 of Bradio's fingers on his dominant hand had been broken. Madroza's wounds were lighter than Gorn and Bradio's, but she had suffered a wound to her abdomen as well. However, not all of the damage they had received was visible to the eye.
It is likely that the previous battle and this one were to confirm the existence of us space attribute gods, and to test our ability to see how long we can impede the teleportation of Gufidgarn and Legion,
said Larpen, the god of mirror images. Gorn and the others grimaced. At the beginning of the battle, Vandalyu had stood on Quattro's stern and called for Gorn and his allies to surrender. After that, he had cast spells that, to Gorn and his allies' knowledge, only the real Vandalyu could cast. Based on this, Gorn and his allies had determined that the ship Vandalyu was on was the real Quattro, or rather, made the assumption that even if it was a fake, it wouldn't self-destruct since Vandalyu was aboard. They were aware that Vandalyu had learned of the space attribute gods lying in wait during the previous battle. Thus, they had not imagined that he would discard his only means of escape when he was aware that his teleportation would be blocked. However, the fake Quattro had indeed self-destructed, and Vandalyu and his companions were still alive and well, having escaped without giving pursuit to Gorn and his allies.
He has learned our formations, chipped away at our forces, and they should have a good idea of Larpen's power. It is likely that the next time he appears, he will be intent on pushing through until he reaches Botan,
said Gorn.
This is no time to be talking calmly, Gorn,
shouted Bradio.
The monsters of the Demon King's continent that you've gathered are still too few in number. The hole we must try to fill is only growing deeper, and we are making no progress.
Please calm down, Bratio,
said Madroza.
Based on what we know from the previous battles, Vandalyu will not appear again so soon. He and his allies have exhausted themselves as well.
Several days had passed between Vandalyu's second and third attack. It was likely that he had spent those days preparing another fake ship to detonate. Thus, Madroza assumed that it would be another few days before the next attack.
We don't know that. If he intends to devour Botan's soul in the next attack, then maybe he won't use a fake exploding ship that takes days to build,
said Bradio.
Madroza, we do not know if Vandalyu will come tomorrow or in several days' time. However, that does not change the fact that we must regain our fighting strength and prepare to intercept him,
said Larpen.
Indeed,
Madroza said in agreement, but she did not withdraw her argument.
However, making futile moves will only make the situation worse. Bradio, even if you continue trying to gather the continent's monsters, with those injuries, you will only make yourself a target for counterattacks.
Gorn had previously suggested using the demigod's descendants who had become monsters, giants and dragon-type monsters, as disposable pawns against Vandalyu. Naturally, they would not gather these monsters by persuading them or striking a deal. They would threaten them and force them to do their bidding. They were not expecting the monsters to understand their plan, and they were not expecting to be able to coordinate their attacks with the monsters. Having them charge at Vandalyu would be enough. They didn't need to train them or form bonds with them, like Nineroad had with her familiars. And even if they were to change sides and join the enemy, it would be no great loss. When the god of thunderclouds Fitun attacked the city of Morxi, some thunder dragons had fled in fear of Vandalyu, while others had become attached to him and tamed by him. Even if the same thing happened this time, it didn't matter. They were disposable pawns, with their number as their only useful quality. Gorn and his allies would simply attack the ones that turned against them along with Vandalyu's forces. If Vandalyu took pity on these monsters and tried to protect them, it was possible that this extra task would hinder him, so it would even be a good thing if that happened. However, these disposable pawns would be facing the Demon King, so no matter their number, they needed a certain level of quality. If they were of the same quality as the thunder dragons and mountain giants used by Fitnun, they would quickly be decimated by the attacks of that flying ship. That was why the demigods had been running around the Demon King's continent, gathering monsters of rank 10 or greater. But now that Bradio and Gorn each had one unusable hand, if the monsters took notice of that, it was possible that they would find an opening to escape or make a counterattack against them.
You're right.
Bratio Lorpan, there is something I must say.
Said Gorn.
I intend to move our defensive line from the sea around the continent back to the coast.
Gorn, have you lost your mind?
Exclaimed Bradio.
That would allow Vandalyu to come closer to the seal. Not only that, but it would mean that Madroza and the others would have to fight away from the sea. What are you thinking?
It's impossible to continue meeting the enemy above the sea. And because there is some distance to the pseudo-divine realms, the support that Sirius Dono and the others can provide is limited.
Said Gorn. Pure gods like the god of Warhorn Sirius, who did not possess physical bodies like demigods, had been able to descend upon the world during the Age of the Gods, but this was a difficult feat now. It consumed a tremendous amount of power, so even descending for a short period of time would require them to exhaust all of their power and fall into a long slumber afterwards. However, even in the current age, there were ways for gods to descend without consuming much power. One of those ways was to descend upon pseudo-divine realms, which were certain spaces in the physical world that had been made to be similar to the divine realms in which gods resided. Gorn and his allies had created numerous such pseudo-divine realms on the Demon King's continent, and they were using them to allow Sirius and other gods to descend upon, and as safe zones where they could rest. However, in the end, they were nothing more than pseudo-divine realms. Gods descending on them were unable to move outside them. And the creation and maintenance of pseudo-divine realms was usually not an easy task. Large quantities of mana or a large-scale religious ritual were necessary to create a pseudo-divine realm, and this cost needed to be paid at regular intervals in order to maintain it. Gorn and his allies used the miasma on the Demon King's continent to meet the enormous mana requirement. The continent was filled with so much miasma that the environment had distorted to the point of resembling a completely alien world. Maintaining a few pseudo-divine realms had no effect on the continent at all. And even if the miasma being used to maintain the pseudo-divine realms was condensed or spread out into the surroundings, the continent couldn't possibly become any more contaminated. However, creating more pseudo-divine realms would be difficult. If they wanted more support from Sirius and the other gods than just playing music imbued with mana from afar, they would need to be closer.
We could not defeat Vandalyu during the first battle. In fact, we are the ones who have suffered heavy losses. It was clear at that point that we cannot keep meeting him in battle over the sea.
Said Gorn.
Don't think of this as a sign that we're being driven into a corner. Think of it as a plan to lure him within our reach so that we can take him down.
It cannot be helped. Half of the monsters you gathered can't fly, after all.
With Bradio's reluctant agreement, Gorn's forces began making preparations for Vandalyu's next assault. Upon hearing that Kanako had something important to discuss, Vandalyu had imagined that it would be to do with the next concert, or making a recruited member she'd become close with a permanent member, or perhaps she had an acquaintance suffering from an incurable illness or a physical defect that she wanted him to cure. But he was wrong,
Van Geyder has appeared,
said Kanako,
So there are more people who want to become idols.
said Vandalyu. TLN, in Japanese, Geyder, Chinese letter slash Daoshi, and like-minded, Chinese letter slash Daoshi, are homonyms, so Vandalyu thought that Kanako had encountered like-minded people.
Van, that's like-minded. I'm talking about Geyder, the kind that guides. A Geyder job has appeared for me.
It seemed that Kanako had gone to change jobs after her previous job reached level 100 after the dungeon clearing in Gartland several days ago and today's stage performance. When she did, a Geyder-type job had appeared among her available jobs.
It's a job that hasn't appeared for you called Artistic Geyder. Is this okay?
Asked Kanako, looking worried. Vandalyu put a hand on her shoulder.
There's nothing to worry about, Kanako. You won't start seeing only weird jobs appear just because you take a Geyder job.
That's not what I was concerned about.
It's not.
Vandalyu was expressionless as always, but Kanako realized that he was genuinely surprised.
Of course it isn't.
Kanako said,
My jobs might be normal compared to yours, Van, but to the average person, they're definitely weird.
She had started with normal jobs like apprentice thief, mage, and archer. Then she had acquired firework technician, a job that was unknown to human societies, and after that her jobs were magical girl, magical idol. If one did not compare them to Vandalyu's jobs, they were certainly strange.
What I'm worried about is that if I take the job, our guidances might clash, canceling each other's effects out or becoming weaker.
Said Kanako.
There aren't any known historical cases of two Geyders being together, are there?
The emergence of a Geyder was not a frequent event. It was normal for a single Geyder to emerge across one long era. It had once been said that 10 Geyders existed at the same time during a period of time that was dark and chaotic even for Lambda's standards. But, in the current age, it was known that this account was mostly false, and only 2 individuals during that time had actually been confirmed to be Geyders. Thus, Kanako's concerns were reasonable.
I think it's fine.
Said Vandalyu.
It's true that there are no cases of two Geyders being together in history, but there are in legends. Over 100,000 years ago, all 7 of the champions who fought the Demon King Gyujuranis were Geyders. In other words, I'm sure it's a matter of the contents of the guidances.
The contents, for example, your guidance affecting undead and certain kinds of monsters.
Said Kanako.
Yes, that's right.
Vandalyu believed that if 2 different guidances were to clash, then it would be a result of the contents of the guidances. A guidance was an ideology and a doctrine. There were ideologies and principles that could coexist, and others that clashed with each other. Guidances were the same. Of course, if the Geyders themselves strived to coexist and avoid clashes, and kept their ideologies separate from one another, then it was likely possible for them to avoid clashing. The champions of 100,000 years ago had also divided into 2 groups, the creation-oriented champions and combat-oriented champions, and these 2 groups had antagonized each other. But Vandalyu had heard from the gods that even though this was the case, they had maintained a minimum level of cooperation, and they had not conflicted to the point of being hostile towards each other, at least on the surface.
We can only make guesses as to what kind of guidance the artistic path is, but we can get a pretty good idea from the name of the job and the things that you've accomplished up to this point. I don't think it will clash with my guidance.
Said Vandalyu. Artistic Geyder was, in short, the result of Kanako's idol activities in this world. She was the first person to introduce idols to this world, idols that were not simply popular individuals or religious images. Not only had she become an idol herself, but she had also encouraged and taught people who had been born and raised in this world to become idols as well. That was why the job had appeared to her. And Vandalyu had supported her idol activities. He had created transformation equipment as she requested, provided Nachin as a stage for performances, and used split entities of himself as equipment and, more recently, as performers. In human society, he was known as the creator of transformation equipment, and he was known to be helping Kanako as the son of Darsha, who had already made her debut on stage. Even if Vandeleu were to find another music or performing art-related guider job in the future, it was unlikely that it would clash with Kanako's artistic guider.
All right. Then I'm off to go and become an artistic guider. It sounds like it'll provide some nice bonuses to my attribute value growth and my skills, and I'm sure we'll have even more audience members with the effects of the guidance.
Said Kanako.
See you later.
Said Vandeleu. Ordinary guiders weren't able to lead others easily like Vandeleu could. They would need to teach their ideology and spread their guidance gradually, but in Kanako's case, she would lead through her art, her singing and dancing. Though it would not be as rapid as Vandeleu's, her guidance would likely spread with each stage performance. However, there was one concern. One could assume that her guidance would target even those who were not a part of her audiences.
Maybe I should let Melissa and Zadyrus know first.
Vandeleu wondered to himself. The guidance that Kanako was about to acquire was likely to also affect those who performed on stage with her. There was a chance that even Melissa, who had reluctantly performed a handful of times, and Zadyrus, who was only performing to create more princesses around her, would be guided.
Kana-chan was laughing and saying, "I'm going to go and become a guider," as she headed towards the job-changing room, so I guess her problem has been solved.
Said Darsha.
Yes, Mom, if she's going around and spreading the news herself, maybe I don't need to tell them.
Said Vandeleu.
You mean Melissa-chan and Zadyrus-san, you don't need to worry about them. If they're really opposed to it, they won't be guided, and if they're guided, then it means that they weren't opposed to it.
Said Darsha.
I suppose you're right.
Vandeleu said in agreement. As Darsha said, one could not come under the effect of a guidance unless all of the conditions for them to be guided were met. However, there was something that Vandeleu had not realized. Guider-type jobs affected those around the user before they appeared as a job available for them to select. This effect was a faint one that was not represented by numbers in one's attribute values or skills. However, that effect was something that even Vandeleu, as a guider himself, had taken notice of after Kanako's stage performance in Gartland. In other words, Melissa, who had reluctantly agreed to work with Kanako, and Zadyrus, who was currently performing on stage with the recruited members in Morxie in Kanako's absence, had already been guided. It was too late.
Well, we need to celebrate, so let's celebrate by making a sauté, chicken katsu, and a chicken curry with Valfaz's meat. And let's make something with Valfaz's feathers.
Said Vandeleu.
Making deep-fried katsu using a defeated enemy, that's a little ironic.
Darsha remarked. TLN, I'm not sure exactly what Darsha means here. One possibility is that it is some kind of wordplay, as the word for irony, Chinese letter / hinaku, and the direct kanji translation for the word is skin and meat. Following this mother-son conversation, Vandeleu headed for the job-changing room himself and touched the crystal ball inside. Transformation equipment, Hollow Shadow Caster, Balor, Apollyon, Demogorgon, Soul Devourer, God Devourer, Nurgle, Ravana, Shaitan, Caillou, God Spirit Mage, Harabaros, Rudra, Blood Ruler, Demon Electricity User, Yin Guider, new. Divine Guider, new. Juggernaut, new.
More new jobs and even 2 guider jobs.
Vandeleu murmured to himself. Was a Yin Guider one who led shadows, or one who led others into the shadow? Was it perhaps a job similar to Demon Guider and Dark Guider? As for the other guider job, Vandeleu knew why it had appeared. TLN, yin here is the yin and yang, and roughly translates to shadow or dark side.
It's probably because I guided Gufidgarn as well as Bashes and the others.
As it was a job for guiding gods, this was likely the case. However, he also got the feeling that if that was true, it had taken a little too long to appear. Perhaps it was a job related to guiding others into the realm of godhood, past rank 13. Or perhaps it was simply a job that did not appear until one had guided a certain number of gods. As for Juggernaut, Vandeleu didn't have a good idea of what kind of job it could be based on his current knowledge. Perhaps it was the name of something from the myths and legends of Earth. Even with the perfect record technique skill, I still don't know what I don't know. Vandaloo had visited Earth after acquiring the perfect record technique skill, and he had stocked up on new knowledge while he was there, but he had no knowledge regarding Rudra or Juggernaut.
Well, seeing new jobs that I don't know much about isn't anything out of the ordinary. Now then, what should I take next?
Although Vandaloo's skill levels had increased with the Destruction Guider job, his attribute values hadn't increased at all. He could select another Guider job to increase his attribute values, or because his current enemies were mostly demigods, perhaps it would be better to take God Destroyer or God Devourer.
Select Dark King Mage.
It would be problematic if he took another Guider-type job and his attribute values continued to not increase, and he would be using Dark King magic against the demigods. And he would also be using Dark King magic to remove the seal on Botin. It was about time that he chose the Dark King mage job. The levels of the Dark King magic, chant revocation, God spirit magic, and spirit therapy skills have increased. Name Vandaloo Zakart. Race Dhampir Mother Goddess. Age 11 years old. Title Ghoul Emperor, Eclipse Emperor, Guardian of the Cultivation Villages, Holy Son of Vita, Scaled Emperor, Tentacle Emperor, Champion, Demon King, Oni Emperor, Trial Conqueror, Transgressor, Black Blood Emperor, Elder Dragon Emperor, Food Cart King, Genius Tamer, True Ruler of the Entertainment District, Patron Saint of Transformation Equipment. Job Dark King Mage. Level 0. Destruction Guider. Attributes: Vitality, 577,752. Mana, 8,940,478,230, plus 8046430407. Strength, 59,631. Agility, 52,968. Stamina, 63,430. Intelligence, 68,171. Passive skills: Monstrous Strength, level 6. Super Rapid Regeneration, level 4. Dark King Magic, level 10, level up. Status Effect Immunity. Magic Resistance, level 9. Dark Vision. Dark Dream Demon Creation Destruction Path Enticement, level 10, level up. Chant Revocation, level 10, level up. Guidance Dark Dream Demon Creation Destruction Path, level 10, level up. Constant Mana Recovery, level 3, level up. Super Strengthened Subordinates, level 3. Deadly Venom Secretion, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, level 5, level up. Strengthened Agility, level 9. Body Expansion Tongue, level 10. Augmented Attack Power while unarmed, small. Strengthened Body Part, Hair, Claws, Tongue, Fangs, level 10. Demon Thread Refining, level 1. Mana Enlargement, level 9. Increased Mana Recovery Rate, level 9. Strengthened Attack Power while activating a magic cannon, very large. Augmented Vitality, level 2. Strengthened Attribute Values, Reigning, level 7, level up. Strengthened Attribute Values, Worshipped, level 5, level up. Strengthened Attribute Values, Demon Empire of Vittle, level 1. Self-Regeneration, Cannibalism, level 3. Augmented Attribute Values, Cannibalism, level 3. Strengthened Attribute Values when enveloped in a soul, medium. Murder Healing, level 2, new. Self-Strengthening, Murder, level 2, new. Active Skills: Blood Rule, level 1. Transcend Limits, level 8. Golem Creation, level 7. Hollow King Magic, level 6. Precise Mana Control, level 3. Cooking, level 8. Divine Alchemy, level 1. Soul Destruction Fighting Technique, level 5. Greater Multicast, level 5, level up. Surgery, level 8. Embodiment, level 4. Coordination, level 10. Super High-Speed Thought Processing, level 6. Commanding, level 10. Thread Reeling, level 8. Throwing, level 10. Scream, level 8. God Spirit Magic, level 3, level up. Demon King Artillery Technique, level 6, level up. Armor Technique, level 10. Shield Technique Level 10. Shadow Group Binding Technique Level 7. Transcend Limits Fragments Level 2. Spirit Therapy Level 2 Level Up. Whip Technique Level 3. Spirit Form Transformation Lightning. Staff Technique Level 2. High-Speed Flight Level 2 Level Up. Musical Instrument Performance Level 1 New. Unique Skills. God Devourer Level 8. Deformed Multiple Souls. Mental Encroachment Level 9. Labyrinth Creation Level 5. Great Demon King. Abyss Level 10. Divine Enemy. Soul Devour Level 9. Vita's Divine Protection. Earth's God's Divine Protection. Group Thought Processing Level 7. Xantark's Divine Protection. Group Control Level 7. Soul Form Level 4. Demon King's Demon Eyes. Origins God's Divine Protection. Ricklant's Divine Protection. Zero Warn's Divine Protection. Perfect Record Technique. Surpass Limits Soul Level 2. Mutation Induction. Demon King's body merged with the Demon King's mucus glands. Demigod. Curses. Experience gained in previous life not carried over. Cannot learn existing jobs. Unable to gain experience independently. Having checked his status, Vandalyu left the job-changing room and thought about the things he needed to do.
I need to teach Matthew and the others how to fight. Then there's the screening of the battles in Alcrum and the Demon King's continent. And after that, I need to persuade Ceres and the others to become abyssal vampires. I need to practice instruments, do my muscle technique training every day, spend time with my family, and let's also implement the restraining measures on the enemy that Sheare suggested.
Vandalyu had learned from Valfez's spirit about the Boulder Colossus Gorn's plan to make up for the forces he had lost, and he didn't mind simply letting it be carried out. An army of monsters commanded by a tamer would be a threat, but a disorderly mob of forcibly gathered monsters was much less so. There was also the fact that the plan to slip past Gorn and his allies to remove Botan's seal directly from underground was underway, so it was convenient that their attention was focused on gathering monsters. However, it was probably wise to execute the restraining measure that was suggested by Vandalyu's trusted vassal, the General and Prime Minister Sheare, to prevent Alda's forces from deploying reinforcements to support Gorn and his allies. The goddess of Flow Pargtarta was a subordinate god of Pyria, the goddess of water and knowledge, and as she carried out her duty of guarding her slumbering master, she received reports from the defense force that had been deployed to the Demon King's continent by Alda's forces. She was not currently in command of the defense force. Alda had approached her to ask her to take command, but she had declined because she had no experience in giving orders. However, she was an old goddess who had existed since before the Demon King Gyujiranes' invasion, and a trusted advisor of Pyria, so the gods of the defense force made sure to keep her informed.
Vandalyu was thought to be after Botan-sama on the Demon King's continent, but it seems that he is also searching for this place where Pyria-sama slumbers.
One of the young gods reported.
Today, one of the elder dragons of the defense force discovered a strange insect, and it turned out to be Vandalyu's familiar, created using fragments of the Demon King. They immediately hid themselves and let it pass, however, so we do not believe that he is aware of the location of this holy ground.
Said another, speaking in a dire tone. Pargtarta's beautiful face was clouded with distress.
Either he is intending to attack this place while pretending to be after Botan, or he has changed targets because Gorndono and the others are putting up a sturdy defense. In either case, we cannot let our guard down. It will be hard on the defense force, but please be extra vigilant so that we can protect our masters,
she said, bowing her head to the younger gods. However, she did not believe that Vandalyu intended to devour the souls of Pyria and Botan. She had already determined that this was a baseless assumption made by Alda. But she had not made direct contact with Vandalyu, nor had she been told this by Pyria, so this was only conjecture on her part. Still, her master had decided that it was best for her to not know anything. If this was the best flow, then she just needed to do as her master trusted her to do. TLN, Chinese letter, Japanese letter / nagir, the Japanese word for flow, also has another meaning, something like course of events. In this context, it is similar to outcome.
Please raise your head, Pargtartadono. After all, the great Alda has sent us here so that we can protect you and Pirya-sama from the evil Demon King's minions.
One of the young gods said,
Please leave it to us. It is our duty to protect the order of this world and defeat evil.
Said the other. Knowing nothing made it easier, in fact, for Pargtarta to deal with these young gods. The fact that Vandalyu sent one of his familiars this way must be to constrain the movements of the force defending Pirya as well as Alda and the other gods, preventing them from sending reinforcements to the force defending Botin and concentrating their strength in one place, or perhaps it is just a way to cause confusion. Things are flowing well, she thought to herself. Gorn and his allies had been attacked 3 times, while the force defending Pirya had not been attacked even once, so wouldn't it be best for Pirya's defense force to send reinforcements? Or wouldn't it be even better to send the whole defense force to join Gorn and his allies in order to combine their strength to battle against Vandalyu? It was true that there were gods who advocated for this. At this rate, if Vandalyu continued to corner Gorn and his allies, this plan of action might be taken. With these thoughts running through her mind, Pargtarta saw the oblivious young gods off as they gave fervent speeches and returned to their posts in high spirits. Another thought, the realization that she had become a wicked goddess, suddenly ran through her mind, but she told herself that this was also part of the flow and tried not to dwell on it. Job explanation. Destruction guider. A job for guiding those who desire destruction, those who wish for their own destruction, extreme pessimists, and undead who wish for their own existences to be extinguished. Thus, it is inevitable that one who acquires this job will meet their own ruin. However, Vandalyu has already experienced multiple other guider jobs, and the guidance of this job is merged with that of the other jobs, so it has become a job that creates change in those who wish for their own destruction and guides them to other paths. The job provides bonuses to leveling skills that place a burden on the user, such as surpass limits and its variations, as well as those that take effect upon destroying others, such as slaughter healing. But it is an extreme job in the sense that it provides no growth to attribute values at all.